The Golden Book of St. John Chrysostom concerning the education of children. This is a Berwick Press recording and it is in the public domain. As soon as ever a child is born, the father bestirs himself, not that he may rightly take order about his education, but that he may magnificently set him forth and adorn him with jewels and rich apparel. O vain man! Why do you do this? Be it that you yourself are clothed with all these things, why do you instruct your child, who is still free from this madness, in these trifles? For what purpose do you put that ornament around his neck? He needs the care of a diligent tutor, who may compose and regulate his manners. He has no need of gold. And you nourish him a lock of hair behind, like a girl, effeminating your own son even from the very cradle, softening thus the vigour of his sex. You engraft into that tender age a superfluous love of riches, and you persuade him to pursue those things which are totally unuseful. Why do you spread for him so large a snare? Why do you so charm him with a love of corporeal things? If a man, saith the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 11:14, if a man wear long hair, it is a shame unto him. Nature will not endure it. God has not indulged it. It is a thing altogether forbidden. It is the practice of Gentile superstition. But there are many who hang gold in their ears. I would that were wholly forborne even by the female sex. You infect boys with this pest also. Nay, and there are very many who deride these discourses as if they were small matters. I tell you, they are not small matters, but exceedingly great and very considerable. A maid, when in her mother's chamber, she has learned to long after these various tires and ornaments of women, being gone out of her father's house, becomes impertinent to her husband and very troublesome, putting him to more charges than the very publicans. I have already told you that it is therefore a difficult thing to reform a vice, because there is nobody who takes care of children, nobody discourses to them about virginity, nobody concerning modesty, nobody of the contempt of riches and glory, and nobody speaks to them of those blessed promises which are made in the Scriptures. If therefore children are from their infancy deprived of governors, what will become of them? If some from the womb even to their old and decrepit age, having been instituted, are not yet arrived to perfection, what will not they perpetrate, who from the beginning of their life have accustomed themselves to hear such discourses? Now indeed, that their children may be instructed in the arts, letters, and eloquence, everyone does studiously contend, but that they may cultivate their minds, few or none are at all solicitous. I will never desist to beseech, to entreat, and to beg of you, that before all things else whatsoever, you would now compose the manners of your children. For if you will be truly indulgent to your child, declare it in this: you shall not lose your reward. Hear what St. Paul saith: if they continue in faith and charity and holiness with sobriety. And though you are conscious to yourself of never so many evils, the rather seek out some consolation for them. Make a champion for Christ. I do not speak it that you should celibate him, send him into the deserts and make him a monk. I say not so. I wish it indeed, and would with all my heart that every man could receive it. But since that may seem a burden too great for him to support, I do not compel. Bring up a champion, I say, for Christ, and whilst he remains in this world, instruct him from his very cradle. If whilst he is yet young, you imprint good principles in him, nobody shall ever be able to efface them when he becomes more firm, being then as the wax which has received the impression. As yet still you have him trembling, fearful, and revering your very looks, your words, and every little beck. Treat him as you should at the beginning. If you have a good child, you will have the first benefit of him and then God. You labour but for yourself. It's reported that when pearls are first taken up, they are only little drops of water, so that he who receives them, being skilful, placing the drops in his hand and exquisitely turning them in his palm, renders them perfectly round and polished. But when, once they have obtained their perfect shape and have become hard, they are no more to be moulded to every man's fancy. For that which is soft is in every way flexible, being not yet compacted. And therefore it is easily drawn whichever way one pleases. But that which is hard, as having once attained the disposition to stiffness, is with difficulty to be moved or susceptible of any other form. Let then every one of us who are parents, as we behold painters adorning their pictures and statues with so much exactness, be diligently studious about these wonderful statues. When painters have once designed a picture, they work every day about it to bring it to perfection. The same do statuaries, abating what is superfluous and adding whatsoever is deficient. So you also, like so many statuaries, bend all your endeavours as preparing those admirable statues for God. Take away that which is superfluous, add that which you find wanting. Consider every day how they abound in natural endowments, that you may timely augment them. What natural defects you espy, that you may accordingly abate them. But with all sedulity, and above all things, be careful to exterminate unseemly speeches. For this custom begins extremely to infect the minds of youth. Yea, and before he has essayed it, teach him to be sober, to be vigilant and assiduous in his devotions, and upon whatsoever he saith or doth, to put the seal upon it. Imagine yourself a king who has a city to govern. That city is the mind of your child, for really the mind is a city. And as in the city some are thieves, some live honestly, some labour, and others transact all that they do foolishly. Just so it is with the discourses and cogitations of the mind. Some of them strive and militate against injuries, like as in a city there are soldiers. Some of these thoughts provide for the body and household, like the senators of a city. Others command in chief, such as our governors. Some speak lascivious things, such as shameless men. Others more modest, such as our modest persons. Some again are effeminate, as women are amongst us. Others discourse more indiscreetly, like children. Some domineer as if over vassals, because they are domestics. Others as over the freeborn, because they are noble and ingenuous, that is, witty. We must therefore of necessity have laws, so that we may exterminate these evil cogitations, and cherish those which are good, but never let us permit the evil to rebel against the good. For as in a city, if one should constitute laws giving liberty and impunity to thieves, it would soon subvert all. And if the soldiers pursue their fury without respect to what is fit, all things fall to confusion. And if every one, quitting his due order, take upon himself to prosecute that which belongs to another, by this usurpation and avarice he violates and utterly spoils the whole government. It is truly no otherwise in that which we have spoken. The mind of a child is therefore a city newly built and furnished, a city full of new inhabitants, and as yet wholly unexperienced. It's an easy matter to instruct and model such, for those who have been at first possessed and grown up with evil principles, such as are many old persons, are truly with great difficulty reformed, though neither is that impossible, for even they themselves may be converted if they will. But such as are totally ignorant will with ease embrace the laws which you enjoin them. Establish laws therefore in this city, and for those who are denizens of it, formidable and severe laws, which if any shall dare to violate, approve yourself a governor and revenge it. For it is to no purpose to enact the laws unless punishment is also inflicted. Make laws then, and look diligently to your work, for know that we impose laws upon no less than the universe itself. Today we build a city. Let the four senses be the bulwarks and the gates, and let all the rest of the body be as the walls. Now these gates are the eyes, the tongue, the ears and the nose, and if you please, also the touch. Through these overtures it is that the citizens go out and in at. That is to say, by these ports it is that our cogitations are corrupted or amended. Go to then, and first let us go to the gate of the tongue. Since this is of all the rest the chief and the greatest port, let us now prepare for it the doors and its bars, not of wood nor of iron, but of gold, for the very city itself which is thus built is of gold, and not any man, but he that is the king of the universe shall keep his court in this city. If thus you prepare it, and you shall perceive by the process his speech, in what parts of this city to consign him a palace. Let us therefore make the doors and the bars for it of gold, I say, namely the oracles of God, as the prophet speaketh. The words of God are more delicious than honey, or the honeycomb, above gold, a much precious stone. Let us teach them to have these things continually in their mouths, and wheresoever they stir, and that not slightly, nor perfunctorily, or seldom, but without ceasing. Nor is it yet sufficient that the doors are overlaid with gold, but they must be framed altogether of solid gold, and having the precious stones fixed one against another without. Let the cross of our Lord be the bar of these gates, which is indeed everywhere enchased with stones of price. Let then this be put athwart the middle of the gates. And when we shall thus have made the doors fast, solid, and of gold, and shut to the bolt, let us then make them worthy citizens, namely by instructing the child to speak gravely and piously, banishing all strangers out of town, lest otherwise a certain impure and infected rabble enter and commix themselves with our citizens, such as are reproachful words, injurious and foolish, filthy speeches, secular and worldly. All of these let us eject. Nor besides the king only permit any to pass these gates, but to him and to all his retinue let them be still opened, according as it is said of it, this is the gate of the Lord, the righteous shall enter into it. And with the blessed Paul, if there be any word which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace to the hearers. Let their talk be giving of thanks, modest songs, and let them always be discoursing of God, and of that philosophy which is from above. But which way shall we now effect all this, and from what topics shall we instruct them? If we become severe judges of the actions which they do, for in a child there is an extraordinary facility. How? He contends not for wealth nor glory. He is yet a child, not for a wife, nor for children, nor for a house. Therefore what occasion does he have to injure or traduce anyone? He only contends with his equals. Appoint him a law immediately, that he wrong no one, that he defame none, that he do not swear, that he is peaceable. And if you shall perceive him to transgress this law, chastise him, sometimes with the stern countenance, sometimes with sharp reproofs, such as may go to the quick and upbraid him, and now and then soothe and flatter him with promises. Do not treat him always with blows, nor accustom yourself so to chastise him, for if you are used to correct him every day, he will soon learn to despise it, and having once learned to do so, it utterly mars all. Rather, cause him always to fear the rod, not always to feel it. Shake indeed the scourge, but touch him not with it. Neither from threats proceed to the work. But let him not know that your works are only menaces, that is, threatenings. For then threatenings are only proper when children believe they will proceed to deeds. For if the offender once understand this economy, he will soon contemn it. Let him therefore expect to be chastised, but yet let him not be chastised, lest it extinguish his reverence. Rather let it remain like a glowing fire, and everywhere burn up the thorns, or like a keen pickaxe, let it dig to the very bottom. And when once you perceive that you have gained any fruit by fear, remit a little, for there is due, even to our very natures, some relaxation. Teach him to be modest and courteous, but if you perceive him to do any injury to his servant, do not connive at it. But check even your child, though free, for he that shall see he is not permitted to reproach his very lackey, will much less dare to injure or miscall one that is freeborn and his equal. Lock up his mouth from ill language if you find him accusing anyone. Stop the mouth and convert your own tongue against her own errors. Admonish his mother, his pedagogue, and his servants, that they still speak and inculcate the same things to the child, that they may all of them be his keepers together, and diligently observe that none of those evil cogitations proceed from his mouth and those golden portals. Do not imagine that the thing requires so much time, provided that from the beginning you press it earnestly upon him, threaten, and do constitute so many guards over him. 2 months will be sufficient, all things will be redressed, the business established, and pass into very nature itself. By this means will this gate be made worthy for the Lord. When there shall be neither filthy speech, scurrility, nor folly, or any such thing, but all has become such a master. For as those who train up their children to serve the state in the wars immediately instruct their warlike youth in the art of shooting, to put on the corset and manage the great horse, their age and stature being no impediment, how much rather then those who are entered into the heavenly militia ought they to provide themselves with these accoutrements for the service of their king? Teach him therefore to sing praises to God, that he has no leisure for impure songs and foolish discourses. And be this gate thus guarded, and such citizens elected, the rest let us destroy within, as the bees do the drones, not suffering them to go forth, or once to buzz at home. But now let us proceed to the next gate. What is that? Even that which is the next, and of near affinity with it? I mean the hearing, for that gate indeed has citizens which pass out from within, but none that have admission through it. But in this they enter in from without, and there are none which by it do sally forth. This therefore has great affinity with the other. For if no filthy nor polluted thing is suffered to climb up by this portal, there will be no great difficulty to preserve the other, since he who does not hear filthy and wicked things does not likely speak wicked things. But if these lie open and common to all, the danger will be great, and give disturbance to all that are within. This then, peradventure, were first to have been spoken of, and the entrance to have been secured. Let children therefore hear nothing impertinent, neither of their domestics, nor their governors, nor their nurse, for as plants have then most need of care when they are young and tender, so have children. Provide them careful and virtuous nurses, that a good foundation be laid at first, and that from their very infancy they receive nothing of evil. Let them then never hear any foolish or old wives' fables. Such a person, says he, gave such a one a kiss. The emperor's son and his little daughter did this and this. Permit them to hear none of these matters, but other things they may hear, for so they be related without any circumlocution, and with all fidelity. They may indeed hear the discourses of their servants and those who wait upon them, but it is not fitting to mix with all promiscuity and with the domestics in general, but let them be known what they are, as it becomes them whom we take as assistants for the framing of these artificial statues. For if it is necessary that being skillful architects and building a palace for the prince, we admit not all the servants in common to be our associates in the edifice, shall we now, when we are erecting a city and making citizens for the King of Heaven, admit of all rashly to the work? Let those servants who are indeed fitted for it be taken to our assistance, and in case we can find none, inquire after some ingenious, that is witty person, for a stipend, such a one as is virtuous, and commit rather all things to him, that he be taken in as a conductor of the work. Let them by no means, therefore, hear such idle fables, but when the child is to have relaxation from his task, for the mind is much delighted to stay a little upon old stories, discourse freely to him, and withdrawing him as much as possible from childish sports, remember, you bring up a philosopher, and a champion, and a citizen of heaven. Discourse therefore with him, and tell him, once upon a time, at the beginning, a father had 2 sons, both of them brothers. Here, pause a little, then go on. They came both out of the same belly. One of them was the elder, and the other the younger. The first was a husbandman, and his brother was a shepherd that used to lead out his flock upon the downs and amongst the thickets. Sweeten then your discourse with some pretty diversion, that the child may take delight in what you say, lest it become tedious. The other sowed seed in the ground and planted trees, but upon a time they went to serve God, and the shepherd, taking the very best lamb of all his flock, offered it up to God. Is it not 1,000 times better to discourse these things to them, than to amuse them with I know not what wonders of the golden fleece and the like? Then encourage his attention again, for the narration itself is a very serious matter. There is nothing in it false. All is out of Scripture. Now because he offered to God the firstling and prime of his flock, there came presently fire down from heaven, and snatched up all that lay upon the altar. But the elder brother did not behave himself in this manner, but out he goes, and reserves for himself the best and first fruits of his labours, offering the second and the worst to God. And God accordingly had no respect unto it, but slighted and turned from it, letting it lie still upon the ground, when the others he received up to himself. Just as it happens with those who are the stewards and bailiffs over our farms, when they come to present their fruits, one of them his master honours and brings him into the house, the other he lets stand regardless without. Just so it fell out here. But what followed this now? Why, the elder brother became dejected, and as one that saw himself despised and not approved of, walks melancholy out. And God says to him, "Why are you so sad? Do you not know that you did offer to God? Why then did you do me that injury? What had you to complain of? How does it come to pass that you offered the refuse to me?" Here, if you think it fit to descend more to his capacity, you may add that he, having nothing at all to reply, held his peace, and answered not a word. A little after this, spying his younger brother, he says to him, "Come, prithee, let us walk a little out in the fields." And when they were there, surprising him treacherously, and being stronger, he kills his poor brother, and thought that he should conceal it all from God. But God comes to him and asks, "Where is your brother?" "What can I tell?" he replies. "Am I my brother's keeper?" Then says God to him, "Behold, your brother's blood cries to me from the earth. Let the mother sit by whilst the mind of the child is moulding with these discourses, that she now and then interpose and praise that which is recounted." But what followed all this? God took him up to heaven, and he being dead, lives above forever. By this means the child will begin to learn the doctrine of the resurrection, for they used to relate such stories in fables. They made her, says one, a demigoddess, and the child believes it, and though he does not know what a demigod is, yet he imagines it something which is more than a man, and he wonders presently at the hearing of it. How much more then when he shall hear of the resurrection, that his soul ascended into heaven, and that God immediately took him up? But as for the murderer, having lived many years after, miserably unfortunate, and continually in fear and trembling, he suffered innumerable evils, and was punished every day. Speak to him concerning the punition with terror, not gently, that he heard God say, "You shall be groaning and trembling upon the face of the earth." The child indeed knows not what this signifies at first, but say it however. As you, when you stand perplexed before your master, shortly to be whipped, tremble and fear, so he lived all his lifetime after he had thus offended God, and hitherto shall suffice for the first. Afterwards, one evening as you are at supper, talk of this again to him, and let his mother repeat the same things. And then, when he has heard it several times over, require it of him. "My son, recite me the story." And the more to encourage him, when you find he has retained it, you shall propose him some reward. The mind will indeed, upon the first narration of this history, gather some fruit by you, as you make the deduction. After this, say thus: "Do you see, child, what a horrible thing it is to envy one's brother? Do you perceive what a crime it is to think that one can hide anything from God? For he sees all things, yea, even those things which are committed in secret. So that sowing this doctrine only in the child, you will have no need of a pedagogue, since the fear which the deity doth hereby work in him will affect the child beyond any other apprehension whatsoever, and extremely move his mind. But this is not all. You shall lead him also to church, and then especially when this lesson is read, how you shall perceive him to exult, dance, and rejoice, that what everybody does not know he does, outrunning in his understanding the words of the minister, and arguing that he knows that already, and receiving wonderful fruit by it. And by this the thing will become sufficiently fixed in his memory. There are many other advantages to be reaped from this narration. Let him be taught, therefore, by you, that from the very beginning, from the death of this child, we are instructed not to grieve when we are afflicted, seeing as he who was thus accepted was by death received up into heaven. When this narration shall be well rooted in the mind of the child, introduce another, as that of another two brothers, and say, there were also two other brothers, an elder and a younger. The elder of them was a hunter, the younger was a keeper and a lover of home, and this has somewhat of more delight in it than the former, as being full of more variety of emergencies, and the persons which manage it being more in years than the former. Now these were also two brothers, and both of them twins, But when they were born, the mother loved the younger, but the father was more fond of the elder, who was wont to pass his time abroad in the fields, but the younger kept altogether at home. One day his father, being now very aged, said to him whom he loved, Son, seeing as I am now an old man, go your way, I pray, and prepare for me some venison. That is, take me a roebuck or a hare, and bring it to me, that when I have eaten of it I may bless you. But to the younger he said nothing at all. Now the mother, overhearing all that the father said, calls the youngest son, and says to him, Son, since your father has commanded your elder brother to bring him some venison, that eating of it he may give him his blessing, hearken what I say to you. Hasten immediately to the flock, and fetching thence some young fat kids, bring them hither to me, and I will make such as your father loves, and you shall carry it to him, and when he has tasted of it, he may bless you, for the father was dark through extremity of age. Now, when the younger had brought her the kids, his mother stewed them, and putting the viand into a dish, delivers it to her son, who carries it in, and she also clad him with the skins of goats, lest he should be discovered, seeing as he was smooth, but his brother was all hairy and rough, that by this means it might be concealed, and his father not discern the imposture. And thus accoutred in, she sent him. And now the good old man, supposing him to have been the elder, having eaten the meat, blessed him, and when he had made an end of blessing him, in comes the elder brother bringing the venison, but perceiving what had happened, roaring out aloud, he wept lamentably. Observe now what a world of benefit this will produce, and do not recount all the story at once, but see what profit will spring from this. For in the first place children will learn to reverence their parents, perceiving how they contended for the blessing, and will rather endure 1,000 stripes than once to hear their father curse them. If you fill their thoughts with such like stories, so as they may imagine them worthy of belief, as indeed they are very truths, how will it not affect and fill them full of reverence? By this also they will learn to contemn gluttony, for that is likewise to be told them, and that he gained nothing by being the firstborn and the eldest, since by the intemperance of his belly he betrayed the excellency of his birthright. Now, when the child shall have thoroughly remembered this, upon some other evening you shall require him to repeat the story of the two brothers, and if he begins to speak of Cain and Abel, remind him and say, I do not mean this, but that of the two others whom the father gave his blessing to, thus giving him some hints, but without mentioning the names, and when he has recited it all, add as follows, and say, Mark now what happened after this. This also sought to have slain his brother, and for that end expected only his father's decease, which the mother coming to hear of and fearing it, caused her son to flee away. Much philosophy, far exceeding the apprehension of the child, may be hence, with a little condescension, implanted into the spirit of the child, so that the narration is skilfully and dexterously handled. Thus, therefore, let us tell him, this same brother went his way, and came to a certain place, having nobody with him, not so much as a servant, no fosterer nor attendant, nor any person besides. Being arrived at the place, he prayed and said, O Lord, give me, I beseech thee, bread and clothing, and save me. And having said thus, overcome with sorrow, he fell asleep. And there he saw in a dream a ladder reaching up from the earth to the heavens, and the angels of God ascending and descending, and God himself standing at the top of all. Then he said, Bless me, and he blessed him and called him Israel. It comes happily into my mind, and now I remember that from the very names another instruction may be inserted. And what is that? Namely, that from the appellations we presently introduce a certain emulation of virtue in children. Let none therefore be forward to name their children for the memory of their fathers, or mothers, or grandfathers, but of the righteous, of the martyrs, bishops, and apostles. Be this also their emulation, let this child be called Peter, that John, and another by the appellation of some holy man. And talk not to me of the Gentile names, for believe it, it is no small reproach and worthy of derision, when in a Christian family some heathen ceremonies are performed, and they light up the lamps and watch which of them shall go out first, and be spent with the other like fopperies, which bring no little detriment to those which practice them. For do not imagine that these are small matters or trifles which are done. This therefore I require of you, that you impose the names of the righteous upon your children, for it was the custom in the beginning, not without reason, that they called their children by the names of their ancestors, it being a kind of consolation against mortality, that he which was gone seemed still to live, by reason of his name, but now this custom is quite out of request. Truly we see that the righteous did not so call their children, for Abraham begat Isaac, Jacob, and Moses were not called after their ancestors' names, nor do we find any of the just so called. Truly we see that the righteous did not so call their children, for Abraham begat Isaac, Jacob, and Moses were not called after their ancestors' names, nor do we find any of the just so called. Oh, what an example will here be of virtue, of consolation, and of exhortation. Moreover, neither do we find any other cause of changing names besides this only, that it may be a monument of virtues. Thou, saith he, shalt be called Cephas, which is being expounded Peter. Why so? Because thou didst confess. And thou shalt be called Abraham. Why so? Because thou art a father of nations. And Israel, because he did seek God. Hence, therefore, let us begin our care over our children and institute their lives. But as I said, he saw a ladder reaching to the heavens and touching it. Let the names, therefore, of the saints enter into your houses by the appellations of your children, that by this means it may not alone compose the manners of the children, but of the fathers also, when he shall remember himself to be the son of John, of Elias, of Jacob, seeing those names were circumspectly and piously imposed, and for the honour of those that are departed. Thus, therefore, let us court the affinity of the righteous rather than of our progenitors. This likewise will be very beneficial both to us and to our children. Nor, because the instance is small, think it to be small, for the supposition is exceedingly profitable. But as I said, let us proceed to that which follows. He spied a ladder fixed, he sought for a blessing, and God did bless him. He travelled to his kindred, and became a shepherd to his kinsmen, then treated with him concerning a wife, and of his return. And here also there will result a world of advantage. Observe, but what a deal he will learn, that being nobly born he despised no man, not to be ashamed of poverty, that he bare adversity courageously, and then all the rest. After this, when he is a little older, relate things that are more terrible, but being as yet tender, do not impose a burden on him, lest you too much terrify and abash him. But when he is attained to 5 years old, or shall be grown bigger, let him hear of the pains of hell, and when he is about 10 or 8 or less, tell him what happened at the deluge, of Sodom, of Egypt, which examples are full of severity, and acquaint him with all these particulars at large. Being then grown bigger, instruct him in matters of the New Testament, of grace, of hell. By these and sundry other narrations and familiar examples, guard and secure his ears. But if any man come in with a false tale, by no means, as I said, let him be admitted. If you find a servant speaking filthily before him, chastise him for it immediately, and be yourself a severe and bitter censor of whatsoever evil they do. But if by chance you see a young maid, yea, rather let there no such approach him, let her not so much as light the fire, unless it is some old woman, which has nothing to attract a young man. From a young maid, I say, flee rather than from the fire, and by this means it will come to pass that he which heareth nothing impertinent will speak nothing impertinent. Thus, therefore, let them be brought up. But we proceed now to another port, the smelling. For this also brings a very great inconvenience with it, unless timely barred. Such are odours and incense, there being nothing which more dissolves the frame and tenor of the mind, nothing that more softens it, than if you are affected with sweet smells. What then, says he? Ought one to take pleasure in dirt? I do not say so, but neither with this nor that. Let none therefore bring him sweet ointments, for as soon as that once affects the brain, it effeminates and softens all the rest. Hence also lusts are incited, and in that do lurk innumerable snares. Therefore lock up that gate securely, for the faculty of smelling is to breathe the air, not to receive perfumes. Some there are which peradventure will deride all this, as though whilst we discourse of this nature we trouble ourselves about trifles. But, in truth, the matter is not small, but the very basis, instruction, and institution of the whole world, that these things are duly performed. There is likewise another gate, more specious than the former, but of exceeding difficulty to guard, namely that of the eyes, as being raised on high, set in the front, and beautified, This has many smaller leaves, by which it not only sees, but is seen, if it is gallantly framed. Here then is great necessity of laws, one of the principal whereof let be, never to send the child to the theatre, lest thereby he receive an entire overthrow at once, both by the ears and by the eyes, and let his attendant observe this especially in the markets, and whilst he passes through the by-lanes and streets, careful that he never falls into that debauchery. Now to the end he may receive no harm by being seen, there are several things to be considered. Deprive him of all over-costly apparel and superfluous ornaments, let him wear his hair modestly short, and if the boy takes it heinously, as if he were disfigured by it, teach him this first, that it is the greatest ornament. Now, that he may not gaze, sufficient to preserve him will be those stories of the sons of God, which happened on the daughters of men, and of the Sodomites, hell, and such like instances. Here then must the governor and he that waits on him be wonderful, careful, and solicitous. Show him therefore other beautiful objects, drawing away his eyes from these things, such as are the heavens, the stars, the flowers of the earth, the meadows, fair books, and so on. These therefore let him delight his eyes also. And there are many other objects besides which are very inoffensive, for it is a port extremely difficult to guard, for as much as it has a fire burning within, and a kind of natural necessity, as I may say. Teach him some divine verses, and thus, unless he is inwardly incited, he will not care to be seen abroad. Be sure that he never bathe with women. It is a very wicked custom, neither permit him to haunt their company. Let him often hear the whole history of Joseph, and now learn the things which concern the kingdom of heaven. What a garland there is laid up for those who are chaste. Promise him a beautiful wife, and that you will make him your heir, but menace all the contrary if you find him disobedient, and talk thus to him: we shall never procure you, son, a virtuous wife, unless you show a great deal of circumspection and an excess of virtue. If you persevere, I will quickly marry you, but especially if he is taught to abhor filthy speeches, he has gained from above a very excellent foundation of modesty. Discourse to him of the pulchritude of the mind, make him resolute against women. Tell him it is a disingenuous thing to be despised of a lavish maid, and that much more circumspection is required in your youth. When any man speaks, he is known, but he that sees only is not known. For this is a very quick sense, and one fitting amongst many persons is able to take which of them he pleases with only one dart of his eye. Let him therefore have no converse with women. He be inwardly incited, he will not care to be seen abroad. Let him therefore have no converse with womankind, his mother only excepted. Suffer him to behold no woman. Give him no gold. Let nothing that is sordid once enter into him, but teach him to contemn pleasure and all such like things. There is yet another gate behind, which has no resemblance to the former, but which goes through the whole body. We call it the touch. Indeed, one would imagine it shut, yet as if it were of all the rest the most open, it admits entrance to all. Let us neither suffer this to be acquainted either with soft clothing or bodies, render him more hardy. We are bringing up a champion, and let us seriously mind it. Permit him neither to use soft coverings nor soft garments, and thus let matters be ordered. Go to then, and entering into the city, let us prescribe laws and make ordinances, for now the gates are in posture. And in the first place, let's take diligent notice of the houses and of the lodgings where the citizens remain, those which are circumspect and those which are dissolute. They report that the place and habitation of anger is in the breast, and the heart which is in the breast, concupiscence in the liver, and the understanding in the brain. The first is both a virtue and a vice. Sobriety and modesty is a virtue, rashness and morosity a vice. Likewise, the virtue of concupiscence is chastity, luxury a vice. The virtue of the intellect is prudence, the vice folly. Let us therefore have a care that virtues are produced in those places, and that they bring forth such as are good, not evil citizens. For these affections are, as it were, the very parents of all our cogitations. But let us now proceed to the tyrant anger, for neither is that to be altogether cut off in a youth, nor upon all occasions to be used. But thus let us instruct him from the cradle, that being injured, he bear it patiently, and that when they perceive another man wronged, they stoutly revenge it. and according as the person is depressed, in a due and convenient manner, take his part. But how should this be when they are trained up to it in their own servants, being undervalued and not impatient, being disobeyed and not outrageous, but rather vindicate that which is committed against others? But in these cases let the father always be arbiter, and when they transgress the orders it behooves him to be sharp and severe, as when they perform and observe them rightly, to be kind and gentle, enticing and alluring the child with many rewards. For with this method God governs the world by the fear of hell and the promises of the kingdom, and so should we our children, permitting them to be vexed now and then for the exercise and trial of their patience, that they may learn how to govern their passions amongst the domestics. And as in a wrestling place, before they play the prize, they daily exercise with their companions, that making their party good with them, they may more easily vanquish their antagonists. So should a child be educated at home, and let his father or brother frequently cross his humours above all the rest, and exceedingly contend for the victory, or else some other defend him, that he may be exercised in that other person. Thus the servants may occasionally provoke him, right or wrong, that so he may be taught everywhere to moderate and qualify his passion, seeing as if the father only incites him, it will be no such great matter. For the very name of father, prepossessing the mind, does not suffer him to turn again and make head, but let his companions and servants, and such as are wittily born, do it, that by them he may be taught moderation. There is yet another. What is that? Whenever he is angry, put him in mind of his proper passions, when he is offended against a servant, whether he himself never committed a fault, and what he would be if he were in his place. But in case he find him striking the servant, meet him with revenge, and if he extremely wrong him, chastise him again for it. Never suffer him to be too soft and remiss, nor overly churlish and morose, inasmuch as he is a man and should be affable and courteous. Sometimes indeed he may have a worthy occasion for his anger, as if hereafter he should have children of his own, or himself be a master of servants. In such a condition anger will be very useful. Then only is it unprofitable when we revenge ourselves. And therefore Paul never made use of it himself, but for their sakes only who suffered the wrong. Thus Moses, seeing his brother injured, had recourse to his anger, and that stoutly, being yet of all men the most meek. But when afterwards he was himself injured, he did not revenge it, but fled away. These discourses inculcate into him. For whilst we are thus trimming the gates, they have great need of such plain narrations. But when entering into the city, we begin to discipline the citizens, 'twill then be fit to discourse to them of sublimer matters. But let this law be fixed in him, that he never revenge himself being injured or wronged, nor ever permit him to despise another who suffereth the like. His very father should become better, who by teaching him in these matters may himself be instructed, or in case he does it for no other end, he shall become better than himself, lest he set a bad example before his child. And therefore let him learn to be despised, and to suffer contempt, exacting nothing of the servants, because he himself is freeborn, but upon many occasions serve rather himself. Let his servants take care only of such things as he cannot handsomely perform in person. For instance, a gentleman should not be his own cook, for it is not decent that, quitting those studies which become a gentleman, he should give his mind to this inferior employment. But if there is occasion to wash his feet, never let him make use of a servant, let him do it himself. And by this means you shall render him witty, mild, and amiable to the servants. Nor permit anybody to bring him his clothes, nor in the bath to use any ceremony to him, but let him perform there all necessaries himself. This will make the youth robust, not disdainful, but affable and meek. Teach him also the things which concern nature, what a servant is, what a freeman. Say to him, Child, there was heretofore no servants in the days of our forefathers. It was sin that introduced servitude. But because one was irreverent towards his father, there was this punishment inflicted upon him, that he should be his brother's servant. Beware therefore, lest you become the servant of servants. For if you are implacable and furious as they were, and in all things follow their example, and you have nothing of virtue more than them, neither shall you have anything of excellence or preeminence above them. Strive therefore that you may become their master, not upon this account, but by your manners and education, lest being freeborn yourself you become their servant. Do you not perceive how many fathers have disinherited their children and adopted their vassals in their stead? Take heed lest any such thing should happen to you. Truly I neither desire nor wish it. They are as yet either of them in your power, and in this sort qualify his passion, persuading him so to deport himself to his servants as to his brothers, and thus instruct him concerning the law of nature, repeating to him the words of Job. If ever, says he, I despised the cause of my manservant or of my maidservant, when they contended with me, what then shall I do when God makes inquiry, and when he visiteth, what shall I answer him? Are they not fashioned in the womb, as I am? For we are made in the same womb. And again, if my maidens often said, who shall give us to be filed with his flesh, I being very mild, think ye that of Paul was for nothing? He who knows not how to govern his own house is not fit to rule in the church. Say therefore, if at any time his style is lost, or his pen is broken by the servant, be not presently in choler, nor miscall him, but rather be gentle and easy to be entreated. Thus, from smaller things, you shall with ease support greater losses. Or if a book string be spoiled, or a brazen clasp, boys take the losses of these things impatiently, and would rather lose their very lives than suffer so great an injury to go unrevenged. Here therefore let their asperity be mitigated, for well you know that he who on these accidents is patient and contented will easily, being a man, undergo all other disasters. When he has then gotten a table book made of some curious wood, pure and white, adorned with brazen chains, and finely polished brazen pins, shining like any silver or the like toys, and that the boy which attends him, happening to lose any of them, you perceive him not moved at it, it is an evident and certain indication of philosophy and great wisdom. Nor should you, upon this, buy him new immediately, lest you extinguish his passion. But when you shall perceive he bears the want of it handsomely, and is not much concerned with it, then repair his losses. Believe it, we do in this no trifling matter. The discourse concerns no less than the polity of the world itself. If he has a younger brother, instruct him to suffer him to be preferred in honour before him. But if he has none, then some servant. For even this likewise is a point of the greatest philosophy. So therefore mitigate and assuage his anger, that it may suggest to us meek cogitations. For when he shall let his affections run out upon anything, when he shall need no man's service, when he shall envy no man's being preferred in honour before him, what room will there be left for anger? It is now time that we speak of concupiscence. Here also charity is twofold, and the violation of it a double loss. I conceive that young men should neither be dishonestly loved, nor dishonestly love young maids. Physicians say that presently after the 15th year, youths are vehemently inflamed with the lust of concupiscence. How shall we now fetter this beast? What is there to be done? What bridle shall we put on it? I know of no other than the fear of hell itself. First, therefore, let us be careful that he neither see nor hear anything which is filthy, nor by any means suffer an ingenuous, that is, a witty youth to frequent the theatre. But if he seek for these pleasures, if he know of any of his contemporaries who deny themselves that vanity, show them to him, that by their example he may be reduced. For there is nothing in the world which does sooner redress it than emulation, no, not any. And in everything else let us observe this rule, especially if you perceive him to be of an emulous disposition. It is a great deal more effectual than either fear or promises or whatsoever else. To these let us devise some other innocent divertissements, bringing him to holy men, grant him relaxation and give him rewards, that thereby his mind may be less troubled at it. And instead of these spectacles, propose to him some pleasant story, talk to him of meadows, of sumptuous buildings, and afterwards wheel off your discourse with an application. Tell him, these spectacles, son, are for base and servile persons to behold naked women speaking immodestly. Promise me that you will not hear nor say anything that is dishonest, and I permit you to go. But it cannot be, it is impossible that you should there hear nothing which is vile. The things that are there acted are unworthy of your eyes, my son. And in saying this, let us kiss and embrace him, that he may perceive how dearly we love him. With all these stratagems let us entice him. What then? As I said already, let a young maid never approach him, nor do any service about him, but some ancient maid or woman that is well stricken in years. Discourse to him concerning the kingdom, and of such as have been illustrious for their chastity, as well as those without the pale, as amongst ourselves, and with these let us perpetually fill his ears. Nay, if we have servants that excel in chastity and sobriety, propose them likewise for examples, seeing as it would be a great reproach that a servant should be modest, and that a free person, a gentleman, should be sordid. There is yet another expedient. And what is it? Let him learn to fast, if not always, yet twice a week, Wednesdays and Fridays at least. Cause him to frequent the church. And when the father walks with him abroad, towards the evening, at the time that the shows are done and the theatres dissolved, let him show him those that are coming away, and laugh at the old fools, who as yet have not the discretion of striplings, and at the young men who are fired with filthy lusts. Then let him ask the boy what he thinks all they have gained. Truly nothing at all but shame, infamy, and damnation. This will prove of no small importance to chastity, that he abstain both from the spectacles and from the discourse. But besides all this, let him be taught another thing, and that is, that he pray to God with all diligence and compunction, and say not to me that these things are not employments for a child. A child is not capable of this. Yes, a child, especially if of a quick understanding and encouraged, is very capable of it. Amongst the ancients we find many such examples as Daniel and Joseph, and tell me not that Joseph was 17 years old, but consider before that age for what he was so dear to his father, and that he was more fond of him than of all his elder brethren. Was not Jacob himself the younger? Jeremiah, Daniel, but 12 years old? Was not Solomon also of the same age when he made that wonderful prayer? Did not Samuel, being but a very boy, teach his master? Let us not then be discouraged. If anyone indeed is a child in understanding, he is not capable of this, nor if he be a child in years. Instruct him therefore to pray with much compunction, and to watch likewise as much as will stand to health, and by all means let there be imprinted on him, being a child, the character of a holy man. For he that is not addicted to swearing, nor being provoked to return injuries, to reproach nobody, to hate none, but gives his mind to fasting, and is assiduous in his prayer, shall from these be sufficiently furnished to chastity. And in case you destine him to a secular life, provide a wife betimes, nor defer it until he is enrolled among the soldiers, or that he has attained to some office in the commonwealth, before you consider it, but settle his thoughts first, and then proceed to secure his glory, which is but a worldly business. Do you imagine it of so small a concern to marriage that a virgin is joined to a virgin? Truly it does not a little concern also the very wife's chastity, not to speak of the young man's also. Shall not this render their affection the more pure? And that which is above all this, will not God himself be then more propitious, and fill that marriage with 1,000 benedictions, when they thus meet together as he has commanded, and will make them cordially to love one another? Whilst he is detained by this affection, he will laugh at all other women, if when you commend the virgin for her beauty and virtue, and all other endowments, you shall then add that she will never endure him, if once she but understand him to be an idle person. Hereupon, as touched in his highest concernments, he will put forth his utmost diligence. For if that holy man, being deceived of his wife, so loved her, as yet to serve her 7 years more for her, nay 14 years, how much more should we? Tell him that all that belong to the virgin, the father, the mother, servants, all the neighbours and friends, are strict observers of his behaviour and actions, and all will relate it to his virgin. With this obligation bind him, it will prove an effectual preservative to the child, so that in case it should not be so convenient to give him a wife very young, let him be a spouse to one at least from the first. This will make him strive to excel in goodness. This alone is sufficient to banish all vice. There is likewise another excellent guard to chastity, that he perpetually frequent the bishop of the church, and from him receive many encouragements, and of this let his father glory to all that hear it. Let the virgin, seeing him, look on him with a reverent esteem, Besides the discourses and the awe of his father, the promises which are made, and with these the rewards reposited for him of God, with all those benefits which the chaste shall be made partakers of, will extremely hinder and repress all lubricity in this kind. To this you may add the gallant achievements in war and in peace, and to these things studiously direct your discourse, continually declaiming against vice and luxury, and bringing it into contempt. It will much conduce to the repute of chastity, and all these particulars wonderfully restrain the mind of the young man, and produce in us most chaste cogitations. There is one more yet remaining. Let us therefore now proceed to that which is the chief of all, and which keeps all entire. And what is that? Namely, prudence. Here must be infinite care used, that he be discreet, and that he abandon and banish all folly. And this is a special and grand point of philosophy, that he comprehend those things which are divine, and what there is laid up for the future, of hell, and the things which concern the kingdom of heaven, since the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. Let us therefore establish this point of prudence in him, that he be also intelligent in human affairs, what riches are, what glory, what power, to the end he may learn how to contemn them, and set his affections upon things which are of highest concernment. Let us often remember him of the good instructions which have been given him, and say, Son, fear God alone, and besides him fear none other, and thus he will emerge a prudent and gracious person. There is nothing in the world that renders a man more of a fool than these vices. The fear of God is alone sufficient to make you wise, and to have such a judgment in secular and human affairs as is necessary. This is the very sum and top of all wisdom, that he is not taken up with impertinent and childish vanities. Teach him therefore that riches avail nothing, worldly glory nothing, power nothing, death nothing, this present life. Thus he shall indeed become a wise man. And if educated in this manner we conduct him to his nuptials, consider how noble a portion you bring to his bride. But let us now celebrate the marriage, not with pipes and harps and dancing, with these kind of things to disgrace the bridegroom thus educated. It is highly incongruous. Let us rather invite Christ thither. Such a bridegroom is worthy of him. Let us bid his disciples. These things well become him. Now let him henceforth thus learn to instruct his own children, and so educate them and they theirs, and thus it will become a golden chain indeed. Let us also promote him to offices in the commonwealth, such as he has abilities to undergo, and such as do not minister to vice, or whether it be any charge in the army, let him learn to gain nothing sordidly, or whether he patronize the cause of those which are wronged, or whatever else he undertakes. Let his mother learn likewise to instruct and discipline her daughter after the same manner, and to avert their thoughts from superfluous attires and fashions from the world, and from whatsoever else are the proper marks of lewd women and strumpets. Let him manage all things by this rule, and wean as well the youth as the maid from pleasure and ebriety. For even this also will be of great effect towards chastity, there being nothing which does more molest and trouble young men than concupiscence, nothing more young women than haughtiness and lux of apparel. Thus, therefore, let us order and compose all these things, that so we may please Almighty God, which we bring him up such champions, and that we and our children may attain those promises which he has made to them that love him, and all this through the grace, benignity of our Lord Jesus Christ, to whom, with the Father and the Holy Spirit, be glory and honour now and ever, and to eternal ages. Amen.